Hey everyone, I'm here with Jonathan Coe, and we're reporting from Winter Wonderland. We're matching. It's a vibe. Um, I wanted to talk to you about Venus and Aquarius because we're about to have this transit, and you are a natal Venus and Aquarius person who I think has a lot of intel about this as a direct experience, not only from living with Venus and Aquarius, but also being an astrologer and like having a lot of reflective thought about this energy. And when I hear you talk about energy work, your understanding of that as it connects internally or in connection with people, it just feels like a really rich introduction to Venus and Aquarius for this transit. But before I get ahead of myself with all of that, how are you doing? What's alive for you as we're beginning here?
Well, thank you for having me here, Sabrina. I always love talking with you. And, the other day I was doing a little bit of an audit for my work and my podcast specifically, and I realized Venus is the one archetype I talked about the most publicly. And I think there's something about the quality of Venus that loves to be in conversation with people and loves to be aired out. I'm thinking about how I know we're talking about Venus in Aquarius, but one of Venus's traditional domicile placement is Libra. And I think there's something magical that happens whenever we invoke Venus in a conversation space. So, yeah, in short, that's me saying I am doing well and I am really excited to see what comes through in our conversation space about Venus.
And for anyone who's tuning into this who hasn't met you before, tuned into your amazing podcast, tell us about, yeah, where people can find you before we get started.
Sure. I am an astrologer, I am an energy worker, and I'm also an artist. And my podcast is called Healing the Spirit. And usually on my podcast, I share mostly weekly episodes. And I would say the heart of my work is really in facilitating people in their process of looking at things deeply, whether that's their own life or the patterns in astrology or the patterns in their behavior. That's a reflection of how their energy moves through them. And yeah, I do this in various ways. I teach, I work with people one-on-one, I work with groups, and I also do it through the podcast because in the podcast I talk about these patterns in ways that is universalized in human design. I'm a 3-5 profile, so we both shared that fifth line profile, Sabrina, and I think there's something about me being in my space, looking at these deeper patterns and sharing it with people in a universalized, not like one-to-one way that I found has some value for myself and maybe also for others. And yeah, I think that's it. Am I missing anything?
Is it a five-line thing to universalize or like speak to the many?
Yeah, at least according to the human design theory, that's one of the ways that the fifth line body likes to be. Ra uses this imagery of if it's a house, the fifth line goes up to the rooftop and speaks from the rooftop and like broadcast out. And I found that to be true for people with fifth lines. There's a quality about us, and I'm also making a bridge here with Venus in Aquarius that I think fifth line people have a gift of stepping back and looking at the larger pattern and then helping people contextualize their experience through the bigger patterns that we're observing.
I'm gonna pull up the chart. I guess it's gonna be randomly for the now
Mhm.
moment in Athens, Greece. But I just want to get a visual of when we have Venus moving into Aquarius. So January 17th, afternoon in Eastern Europe. So it's going to be midnight-ish or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm just thinking about what you were saying about universalizing and this kind of five line or Aquarian thing, because sometimes I've wondered or just noticed myself, like my nervous system is so comfortable broadcasting to like many
Mm,
people at once. And I've been doing a ton of trainings on like somatic work and sexological intimacy coaching and learned these very granular, intricate practices that you can do on yourself or do one to one that train a different nervous system channel for one to one intimacy. And it's been really striking to me how wildly intense it is to be connected to another person, right? Like there's a field of information. It's less intense if all the energy is plugged into matrices, right?
mm,
Like normal cultural ways of behaving and rigid identity roles. But when you're just in presence, when your soul is like fully here in the body and you're interacting one to one with someone else, it is a highly charged, full of information field. And yeah, that's just very different than as I've had a newsletter, as I've been publishing for more than a decade. I just sit down in my like hermetic space and feel into what the thread is and channel and share it and would get the feedback. Oh, this is just what I needed to hear. At the very beginning, I had a vision of, yeah, connecting with my people like across the globe and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting that we're starting just with this fifth line field awareness
mhm.
and how there is like a love and intimacy to it. And it's also so remote at the same time.
Yes. Yes. Have you ever watched the X-Men or do you follow the X-Men, Sabrina?
Mhm.
No. Um, it just made me think of the X-Men because there are two characters who are uh gifted at telepathy in the X-Men. One is
That
Professor
sounds
X
like
and the other
I
one.
love those kinds of connections.
Yeah. Yes. And the other one is this woman named Jean Grey. And Jean Grey is able to pick up on people's thoughts when they are in proximity to her, but Professor X has cultivated his ability so that he has this machine that he can connect to, and it's almost like the internet. It's like you're able to then connect with the wider thoughts and brains of people. And when you were speaking, it makes me think about how the nervous system has both ability, right, of kind of tuning into the bigger field and also tuning into a smaller relational field. And yeah, I think in this moment, I'm curious to hear if you have anything, any pieces of wisdom you want to share about that transition from the, being so comfortable being in your own space and tuning into the larger field, and then allowing your field of psychic vision, maybe, or neurological vision to attune to one person and one conversation.
Such a cool question. Um, so I think that I've always felt comfortable with the directionality of tuning into other people. And I love having the role of astrologer, oracle, or whatnot, or practitioner to do that because I get to use my body as an instrument and provide a service, like to tune into the other person, to read them, to guide their energy, to create that relational agreement with them. And I love being tuned into as well. I just
Mm,
find it really rare that people are able to do the same thing for me. Practitioners often, like I love healers and psychics and oracles and whatnot because we're playing the same game of like reading energy.
yeah.
And what nervous system healing and trauma healing and studying sexological intimacy coaching and somatics, a lot of what that has done is just create way more freedom and ease for me to like have my frequency intact when I'm interacting with people, even if they're not exquisitely attuning to me, which is my preference to be deeply and very particularly attuned to. I love when people read my mind, like I love that kind of psychic connection.
Yeah.
And it's not necessary all the time. And so I think feeling into, you know, having like a glimmery, shimmery, like butterfly mermaid, whatever frequency, or a fairy or something like that. And to be like, I don't have to be like a fairy in Peter Pan that like dies if you don't believe in her, you know?
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
so I think learning how to actually cultivate a stronger authority in my own signal, not just in my professional life where I am in that role of holding a space, but just out in the world where it's like, if I want to be perceived and witnessed, or if I want to like interact or engage or be playful with people, having more of that sense of like, I can do this. And also, I've really learned how to have conflict. That has been so liberating because my nervous system didn't have a lot of resilience for conflict in the past years in my life, specifically just in like one-to-one relationship, friendships, romance, relationship. And so it would cause me much more distress and anxiety. And now it's so much easier to actually feel conflict inside of a unified relational field. It's not polarized, it's not like an attack. It's like a, I'm having a problem and I'm putting it on the table so we can address it, or I've hit a limit. I've
Yeah.
realized that I've hit a limit. And so
Yeah.
just all these like micro attuned skill sets for relationship. In other words, being an Aries sun is like learning how to like do the Libra stuff, and all this subtle nervous system work that's helped me
Mm,
with that. So I think that during times in my life, like in my early 20s, I went through a number of upheavals that were out of this world and required me to like search for the most wise, profound practitioners I could find, like to look for the wizards and be like, what the fuck, help me unsort the situation. And because I felt so unresolved in that way, I felt at the same time, I'd get feedback for being a good astrologer or for having these wise things to say to the collective. So it was so much easier to keep investing in that kind of one to many newsletter thing. And
right.
I was always waiting for like the magical person to fall out of the sky who'd like get me. And studying nervous system healing and all these things actually showed me that I'm responsible for creating my relationships, that I have to steward my own life force, that yeah, that there's more power or agency that I actually have to create the one-to-one relationship connections that I want. So, all that being said, I do still feel highly particular, and I find that I get along the best in a personal way with other people who are also, as you mentioned, like the people that kind of step back from the group and examine or interpret. Like, I really, in any cultural environment that I'm in, I like the person who can participate in everything that's happening, but is not so immersed in it that they're not thinking critically of it, which
Yes.
is an Aquarian thing.
Definitely. Yeah. Wow. I love hearing about that, Sabrina. That's really profound. And I'm also wondering if your journey into the more personal, the attunement to your own nervous system and personal one-to-one spaces, do you feel like it shifted the way you speak to the collective, like in your newsletter or in your podcast?
Yeah, you're asking me really good questions, and I'm going to answer this, and then I'm going to interview you. Um, damn. Okay, so the thing that's shifted is that I am reassessing what I share because there was a part of me, a lot of the intimacy that I've shared with the internet came from feeling absolutely shattered, like having an experience of just like, whoa, what's reality? I experience magic, but I also experience this like tragic experience or something like that. And that I like reached out to the whole world to find resonance because I felt so alone. And there was like a song inside of that. And I found amazing people all over the world. And I'm just kind of starting to slowly kind of reassess that because a part of me is really happy to continue to be like a live diaryist and like share all these like intricate internal things on the internet at large. But it does, I don't know, doing that is like interesting if you're like a single person. But what about
Right.
like the part of me that, like building relationship or maybe building a family life or whatnot and feeling into like, I don't want to completely go into hiding and stop having a public presence, but maybe my energy is starting to come inward. And
Mm,
it's kind of like letting go of the internet as like a romantic figure or readjusting that romance. Like, luckily, I don't feel like overly exposed or something like that. I think it's an adventure of a lifetime to be a young person processing their deep soul material in real time on the internet to a loving audience. Like,
yeah.
that's so cool. And that was so profound and moved a lot of energy. But for some reason, I have this like wintry kind of consolidating feeling of wanting to be a little bit more reserved after so much sharing.
Yes. I'm also hearing that there may be a process of maturation in how you like to talk about it because you've been doing this for a very long time. And as your work grows with you, the way that you talk about the work also grows. Mhm.
Thank you for these amazing questions, which I feel like are actually an example of being a Venus and Aquarius
I
person.
I agree. I agree. I think that was a transmission.
Because I experience Aquarius when an expression of love. I think
Mm,
Aquarius is like when you bring your process or your art to a professor or someone who's just like really intelligent and asks questions or reflects who you are or what you've been working on in a way that like opens up even more of it, but it's like a loving intellect.
yeah.
And I think Aquarius, it's part of that Leo Aquarius axis, and Leo is romance. And Aquarius is like romance that's attuned to a very specific station or frequency. But I'm curious, like how you describe Venus in Aquarius. It's
Mm.
such a broad question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll share what's coming to mind in this moment. Earlier, you mentioned my experience as an astrologer, Sabrina, and I have had historically quite a few clients, especially in long-term relationships with me, who are Venus and Aquarius people. And when you mentioned that, that lit something up. I notice as a through line, Venus and Aquarius people, there are kind of two distinguishing factors that I see in my practice. One is an awareness of the deeper underlying thing that's not said. So, in a lot of communications, Venus and Aquarius can really pick up on when something is not totally in alignment. It's the other day somebody uses the word bullshit detector, and I would probably choose a more compassionate language around it because I don't think
Coherence.
Coherence, yes. Coherence, transparency is maybe another word that's coming through. When someone is saying something and their energy is not entirely in resonance with what they're saying, Venus in Aquarius can be very sensitive to that. And as a result, what I've seen in clients and in myself is a lifelong pattern of almost avoiding looking at the pattern because it's confronting. But at some point, all that avoidance led to a crash out, and then you can't avoid it anymore, right? In the past year and a half, I would say, I've experienced Pluto on top of my Venus natally, and my experience with that has been relentless. It's really asked me to be extremely honest with myself about what I want, Pluto on my Venus. And every time I stray away from a sense of integrity and a sense of this is who I am and this is who I know myself to be, and when I act out of alignment with that, I kind of get slapped back. And then I have to figure out how to be and how to relate and communicate myself authentically and sincerely. And that requires deep attunement to places where I'm straying away from that coherence that you were mentioning, and when other people are also straying away from the coherence, right? Because authenticity and sincerity doesn't happen in a vacuum. For a lot of us, what we want is authenticity in showing up in relationships, in showing up to a room, right? So that's the first piece. And I think the second piece is Venus in Aquarius really loves figuring out the through line. There's an expertise that Venus in Aquarius aspires towards. There's a standard that Venus in Aquarius aspire towards, but the way that that's showing up is not necessarily plunging into the depths of just one particular skill set or knowledge, body of knowledge. It more has to do with like this compare and contrast that we can do. So I'm going to give a tangible example. Right before I jump on this Zoom call with you, Sabrina, I was reading Adam Ellenboss's newsletter, and he was talking about the divinatory practice of astrology. I think he specifically is talking about horary, right? And I've been dipping into horary, and something that I've seen in my own journey as a Venus and Aquarius person is I don't just have one divination tool. I have a relationship with the I Ching, I have a relationship with the tarot, and now I'm dipping into horary astrology. And that is a pattern I see a lot throughout my life. And I also have a moon in Gemini, so I think there's something there about being curious about a lot of different things. But I've also met other fellow Moon and Gemini people who are interested in just dipping their finger into the jar. And once they dip into the jar, they're done. But my experience also having Venus in Aquarius is I'm not just satisfied with dipping my hands into the jar. I want to understand what are the through line that connects all these different jars, right? Another example is I grew up very religious, specifically in the Christian context. I grew up in an evangelical church, and just having exposure to one religion was never enough for me. I was always interested in all the other religions, which was very frowned upon in the context in which I grew up. But once I was out of that environment, I couldn't help myself. Like I would go to a Buddhist temple, I would learn about Ganesha and all these other different religious traditions because what I'm truly interested in is figuring out the through line between all these different, like where is it intersecting, right? Which to me is also very Aquarian. So I'm going to pause there and see if you have any reflection. based on
Yeah,
that.
there's so many things. Like, one, I was feeling so relaxed when you were speaking. Like, I felt these
Mhm.
like waves come through where I was like, you speak with energy work encoded into it. And so the thing you were talking about with coherence, or I put that word in there, sorry, we were talking about like the energy below the words.
Yeah.
I don't know, like the experience that I was having in real time was you were speaking words, and underneath it, there was like a wave that just felt good. Like I wasn't tracking if they were the same energetically, but there was something about like the layering of
Hmm.
things. And I feel like that is something that when you have studied all these different things, you're integrating these through lines, that simply by speaking to a thread, it's going to wave, there'll be a wave pattern of other parts of the thread or other things that it connects to. And if you've integrated that, it follows the words or the trail of words. I was thinking about Saturn a lot, like the integrity, authenticity. So, Saturn is a traditional ruler of Aquarius, and that desire for the through line or studying something deeply. It's like, in order to really build the bridge or do the synthesis thing that's happening in Gemini, you can do that at a superficial level, or you can do it at like a, you've studied these different disciplines for years and years, and then you're bridging them together. And it's very
Hmm.
slow, actually. Like, it's a little bit inconvenient sometimes to be
Yes.
integrating or doing integration work like that. And I think even trauma, which is an Aquarius thing, is ultimately the arc bends towards integration, because trauma is the experience of a part of the soul fracturing and going very far away. And when it goes far away, it's having this experience that's really out there. And
Hmm.
then when we bridge that out there territory with the central channel of ourselves, then we have huge capacity because we're present, but we also have threads that go out there. And before that integration happens, people are split, right? They're not in coherence with themselves, or they get hijacked or triggered or blown out, or they're like not in themselves. And so that's an experience that can feel really difficult, very profoundly difficult. And yet, the end of the story, when those things become integrated, is just this huge kind of bandwidth.
Yeah.
So, even how that then relates to relationship in terms of being able to handle like range, to
Yes.
there was something that you said on your podcast. It was a while ago. I think I was listening to this summer to this thread that you were speaking of, where you were speaking about relationships, and you were like, if you have a pattern of trying to change people in relationship or letting other people change you, it just won't work anymore.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. I remember
I'm really
that.
curious where that thread was coming from, because it really
Mhm.
like popped something for me. Like
Mm.
it kind of popped the illusion and showed the futility of like, you can try to manipulate or change people, but ultimately everyone knows that it's happening. Like, it's not unknown in the field, and there's only so long that that incoherence or lack of integrity can literally structurally exist before it implodes or explodes. And
Yes.
if you already know that in advance, then what's the point?
Yes. Exactly. My entry point into it was I've been contemplating the shift that human design talks about, Sabrina, in 2027. And one of the pieces that's moving is this idea of the background frequency being more directed towards maintaining tribal agreements into the background frequency prioritizing individual flourishing. And in within that framework, I'm massively oversimplifying here, but essentially the last 400 years has been this experiment collectively of humans trying to figure out if there's a system that can hold all of us and essentially allow the flourishing of as many people as possible. And in 2027, the global cycle is shifting into prioritizing people's empowerment, individual empowerment, and also individual expression. And when I was feeling into that, it helped me see a pattern within my life, in my both in my professional practice and in my personal life, where there were things when I was growing up that my parents taught me about how to be a person and how to be in society. Especially as a millennial, I think it's easy to blame them and say, like, oh, I was conditioned to be a certain way. But the truth is that was working in the 90s when I was growing up. My parents did tell me, this is how you need to be in school, and this is how you're going to get out of trouble. And it's true. That was how I stayed out of trouble. And as I get older, what I notice is the world around us is changing. There's less people internally willing to abide by that invisible rule. And we see this through various waves of liberation movements, right? That's been happening since in the past 400 years, where people are, maybe the first wave was women demanding equal rights. And then there are other groups of people that start to really look at why the collective was orienting towards certain group of people, right? Essentially, if I'm gonna pause myself there and maybe take it back. What I'm seeing is a pattern from more of a monarchy, right, where a certain group of people born into certain families have certain privileges, and everybody else are just peasants, basically. And then we're shifting into a world where people are prioritizing their own individual path to empowerment and fulfillment.
This is really,
And yeah, I'm curious if you have anything you want to share. I'll pause there.
yeah, you're helping me contextualize something that I've been thinking about it less lately. I thought about it a lot earlier, some months back, but maybe my Instagram algorithm has really calmed down because I feel
Mm,
like for a while I was getting all of the dating war kind of content and what I was making out of it was that in previous generations, I think relationships may have been more simple. I mean, obviously, relationships haven't ever been simple, but I think that there were some contracts of like, the person who brings in the money, the person who's like homemaking, or, these are our simple agreements, or we do these things together, blah, blah, blah. And now people are wanting a lot more emotional intelligence, deeper coherence, erotic intelligence, energy awareness, like all these kinds of, like, I guess instead of being comfortable around people who have like a lot of unconscious material that they're just not facing, and everyone's just like at a barbecue and smiling and shooting the shit and whatever. Like people want the ayahuasca, the like deeper, maybe it's Pluto and Scorpio people being in
yeah.
this, but I feel like there's this deeper, like if we don't have to be in relationships to economically survive, then why do it? And that essentially there's a frustration layer with that of, but I did all the right things. I did everything to be in my feminine. I did everything to be a good man. Like,
Mm,
and this kind of like, I followed the rules. I did it right. And I'm still not, so there's this like collapse that's happening.
yes.
And so when you were speaking of that rule following, I just think that there was maybe previous generations where following some of these social scripts was a simpler way to social reward and happiness. And now there's this gnawing, aching, I want more. There's like an evolutionary churn that's happening, and it's requiring a lot more awareness, right? Like it reminds me of the Aquarian capacity for meditation, like to witness one's thoughts, to be able to see patterns, and to, from a distance, be able to make different choices. And I think that it's unnerving
It
sometimes to
is.
just like try to be in a relational field when you feel the matrix pressing down on it, where it's just like, can we just be in connection? Can we be in the present moment together? What's all this other overlay that's
Yeah,
happening?
precisely. And simultaneously, when that matrix programming is starting to fade out, as you spoke to earlier, there's a period of adjustment and potentially confusion that can happen too. Because authenticity is not this pretty, glossy, you know, cute pink thing that it's sold as, I think, in the marketplace, maybe the past 5 years or 10 years. Authenticity is really inconvenient because authenticity is essentially us saying, I recognize that there are these social rules, but I'm not going to default into them. And instead, I'm going to choose to attune to the present moment, to myself and this relational field, and see what arises. And sometimes that looks like the social agreements, but a lot of the times it doesn't. And it could lead the conversation or the relational dynamic could lead to moments of tension. It could lead to disagreement. It could lead to us not feeling like we know exactly what the next steps are. And that is, as you pointed out earlier, Sabrina, that requires a vast nervous system capacity to navigate because there's tension, but also from that tension, there's the dissolving of the tension. But the dissolving then leads into another tension, right? And so earlier when you said that this way of authentic relating requires, I forgot exactly what word you were saying, awareness. You mentioned awareness. I would add that awareness is made possible through space, which is also very Venus and Aquarius, right? There is a quality here where, in terms of being with the Venus in Aquarius energy, it does require a lot of space. I always think about Aquarius as the top of the mountain, and the air is very thin, right? Whenever we're at the top of the mountain. And as a result, maybe we can't run as fast, or maybe we need to take a little bit of space between our words and between one action to another. And part of the work is being okay with that silence and being okay with that pause, because from that space, awareness can emerge.
Hmm. I love slowness and space, so you're speaking my love languages. Um, I'm curious what happened when you experienced the Pluto transit. So if I bring up the chart again, when Venus enters Aquarius, she's headed towards Vesta and Pluto. Like even in this moment before that happens, we're already in a Venus Pluto
Mhm,
transit.
mhm.
But yeah, you've lived through this. Pluto like already hitting your Venus. I'm curious what that was like.
Mhm.
You were saying that it was ruthless.
It
What was the
was.
quality of that? Like what was happening that you feel you can share?
Yeah. I don't experience Pluto transit as being dramatic. I actually experience Pluto transit as being almost glacial in its pace. And the imagery that's coming to my mind right now is the Princess and the Pea. That was my experience the whole time. It's like I was the princess. I was I've been trying to fall asleep, but I could just sense something is not right in this mattress, you know. So it was a process of over time gradually removing the pieces one by one until I found a little pea, right, hiding somewhere in that stack of tiny layers in the mattress. And more um, more concretely, in that period, it feels to me like it culminated in me finally getting laid off from my day job. Like that career path gave me a lot. That career path was correct when I entered it, and eventually it became less and less aligned to where I know my spirit and my soul wanted to go. And the process to getting there, hmm, was painful, Sabrina. It required me to really look at my life and the personality that I was hiding under. And it's interesting because over the years of being alive, throughout my 20s, the one reflection I seem to get from people around me is that I show up authentically. So then when I finally had that experience of Pluto on my Venus, and there were all these challenges to stepping into even deeper authenticity, my first reaction was, I'm already authentic, but even that, like in me, holding on to the ego identity of how authentic I was, there was a hiding mechanism there. And the biggest lesson that I can share here with people is that it was a process of unmasking for me. And a lot of it had to do with actually my my singing practice because I started working with um, this teacher. Her name is Marissa Michelson, and the approach that she teaches is called vocal de-armoring, and it's a somatic-based voice work modality. And a lot of it has to do with really observing different tension that we place around our face and in the neck area that actually impacts the nervous system. So this entire area, right, from the top of the head here, I'm pointing to my hairline all the way to the chest, both the front and the back, are extremely active or participatory in the process of singing. And singing has been a huge part of my life. I've been a musician for as long as I can remember, and I've always wanted to be a singer, but there was something about my embodiment that didn't allow me to really sing in a way that feels good from the inside. And in practicing this modality, what I've learned is that there are all these different kind of involuntary muscle responses that I have that was impeding my expression. And for me, that shows up specifically in trying to be nice or trying to appear really, really friendly. And, that was working for a very long time. I'm in a male body, and I think that that diffuses the tension that can sometimes be present in a space. But me consistently from a nervous system and these fine musculature um, systems trying to maintain a kind of friendliness and niceness was preventing me from going deeper with people. And the implication of that was massive because once I started to apply that to my music practice, there were things that I wasn't able to do vocally as well as at the piano because I'm also a pianist that suddenly just miraculously became available to me. There were these long-standing obstacles that I labeled as a technical problem, Sabrina, especially in my piano playing, that was actually rooted in my nervous system and therefore my muscles being unable to settle and to let the weight of my body help me flow in the music making. Because I used to orient to music making from a space of trying to get it right. And from this place that I'm in now, I realized that conceptually, as a musician, what you want to do is to connect with the flow and then be in a space that's relaxed but alert enough to be riding the flow, right? And that is a metaphor for all of life. That's also true with regards to relationships. That's also true with regards to making money. And so that's applicable to all areas of my life. And um, I'm wondering now if I actually answered your question. I guess to
I
summarize, yeah,
I don't even remember what I asked. Maybe it was
you
about the
asked about the
Pluto
Pluto
transit.
Venus. Yeah.
I was just really mesmerized by
Mm,
your answer.
mm,
And I think it goes to show also the Aquarian relationship to embodiment and somatics, because it's not a sign like that maybe is typically thought of as like a somatic sign or
mm.
something like that. But when I think about embodiment, Aquarius is so connected to these higher intelligence based shifts of like learning the information about the nerves from here, the top of your head to your chest and how it relates to the vocal cords in the face. Like, didn't just change singing, but it like radically opened up this whole other creative embodied wave.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting how that happens. Like I've been noticing with my clients who have Aquarius signatures that they take really well to somatic practices. It's like a laboratory and there's like a real discovery. There's a real unwinding that happens because
Yeah.
we have these energetic highways or the irrigation canals that Saturn and Aquarius relates to, and there's a structure. And when we learn the nature of that structure and learn how to reroute the energetic pathways inside, it literally opens up a whole new reality. And I
Yes.
think Aquarians are really gifted at that type of tinkering. Yeah. So
Yes.
that was really powerful
Yes.
to hear that trajectory of events and how it made something possible that you thought you just had to figure out technically. Like, how many
Yes.
people are trying to figure out how to do things right, how to get their work done, how to accomplish a certain thing, and they think it's just about doing it right. And literally, there's some kind of internal knot that once it's unwound, all the energy and space opens up to move toward those goals or desires.
Yes. Yes. Which then results in us being able to shift away from rumination and into embodied experimentation, right? You don't have to know where you're steering the ship of your life in the next 10 years. I mean, if you have the vision, that's fabulous. But you can just know the next three things you're going to do and let that lead you into the next thing. But I find that that orientation is almost practically impossible if it's not paired with an awareness of the body and the nervous system, and also how that connects to our energy. Mhm.
Yeah. I feel like the nervous system is like the Aquarius. That is the sign I associate the most with the nervous system. And Venus in Aquarius is like literally like the musicality, like the instrument that the nervous system is. Like,
Yes.
I really value, I don't have Venus in Aquarius, I have Saturn in Aquarius, but I really value when people study the nervous system and learn some kind of specialized technique for opening inside related to that because it, I mean, not only does it create benefits in their own life, but it also opens up the relational field. It's pleasurable to
Yes.
be around.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
like,
And earlier you mentioned something that I bookmarked, Sabrina, and I kind of want to return to it, which was I don't remember exactly what you said, but how I received it was um this idea of authenticity and hmm, it's making me think about how for a lot of people when they think about authenticity, there's almost this I don't know if this is the right word for it, but it's like solipsistic quality to it. It's like it's almost like it closes in on you. Like authenticity is about figuring what I want, how I want to show up, who I am, right? And then from that space being unfuckwithable. And I appreciate the empowering sentiment of orienting towards being unfuckwithable. And also, I don't think it's something that people need to, I guess here's what I'll say about it. I challenge people to go a step further than being unfuckwithable. I challenge because I think when we are in that space of kind of nervous system flexibility and energetic flow, it's not about being unfuckwithable. It's actually
no.
about this ability to deeply connect and go beyond the level of kind of that tension, right, that we were talking about earlier. Because the tension is showing us that there's something to, there's an opportunity to go deeper here. And when we go deeper, there's a level of connectedness that is beyond enmeshment that we can reach with people.
Yeah, it's like
Both
being
on a
open to life.
yes, yes, exactly. And it's not separate. Like there's a unitive quality to it, I found. Um, it's not just on a body level, but it also then engages the intellect. It also then engages the emotions. It engages the energy. It's like, I think you said the word musical earlier, Sabrina. I think that's the best way to explain it. Because when great music almost just like happens, but as any musician can attest, a lot of preparation goes into it. Mhm.
I'm thinking about something that um, I'm like, now I just want to swap stories about nervous system upgrades from these like micro skills that are really revolutionary. But in the sexological intimacy coaching training, we learned about repair processes. And it was really interesting the paradigm that relational repair was held in. I mean, it included an awareness of power because the repair structures involve like between client and practitioner. So there's like the up power and the down power role. So that factored into it. But it's not just for that. It can be in peer to peer, like romantic relationships and whatnot. But that there's a paradigm of pole positioning, as in like if I'm mad at you, then now we're at war.
Mm,
And when I'm bringing to you my anger, it's an attack that you then have to defend or go into some kind of pattern about. Whereas, like, diffusing that, there was this repair process we learned where you actually allow your heart to break open for the other person and feel and receive the impact and not take it personally. And because you don't take it personally, you don't have to go into, like, we got a list of like 15 different mechanisms that people go into to deflect relational responsibility after impact. And it's really interesting because for a lot of people, you can find yourself in it, where it's like you go into counter accusation or you say it's a projection or all the kinds of things that we immediately do to enter a polarized position with the other person. And so, in order to actually receive and empathize with the person's impact or hurt, you have to put aside all your associations and have what's called response flexibility. So, to be able to be present in a non hijacked state of consciousness when there is someone who's mad at you, for
mm,
example.
mhm,
This was really profound. What I started to see after that is it really shifted my entire capacity to relate to people. It shifted my ability to bring forth issues that I had or like hurt or impact that I had and like have the nervous system capacity to do that, but also to fully receive people bringing that to me and
mm,
not feel attacked or on the defense about it. And it was really interesting because pretty much right after I learned that, someone came out of the woodwork and told me, like, I don't know if you remember this moment from a few years ago, but I'll never forget the way that you did this. And they were so upset. And I read it and I was like, I'm so sorry. And like, we got on a call and like the field like opened up and repaired. And it was
mm,
really interesting. Like, that whole experience has shifted my paradigm to allow conflict or to recognize that conflict is part of relationship. And I realized that before I had this awareness, I had to keep people at a certain distance because if we ever got to the place of rupture or fracture, I didn't know how to get out of it. It would just
yeah,
create an unbearable distance.
right.
And I also noticed I had an interaction with someone where I don't I don't even feel like I was being like off. I was upset about something and the other person was very activated, went into all these patterns, got like very accusatory and almost like hysterical and was saying, this is like this is so unnecessary. This is like an unnecessary rupture and I'm like this is not past, repair. But it was like I used to be like that.
Yeah.
Like I've had situations where I couldn't repair and whatnot. So that was a peer. And that situation just showed me like, if we look at this from like a more community, or systems perspective, or even just a relationship, it's natural that when people with different interests or different association networks come together, that impact and rupture will happen. But if we don't have tools for moving through that together, then we have like a brittle, easily fractured system.
Yes.
So learning actual repair process, it wasn't just about doing the right thing and being a good person so that you never rub anyone the wrong way. It was like it's a given that you're going to upset people and that people will upset you. So what do you do after it to come back into connection? And that just is an entirely different
Mhm.
paradigm. I still feel like a lot of the world or social conversation operates in this space of blame and who's the one at fault. And that doesn't necessarily solve the problem of coming back into connection, or sometimes repair involves never speaking again or cutting the
Yeah.
relationship. That could be the result.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm rambling a bit. No.
No, I think that's so on point. And what I'm hearing from you if I can summarize, is you connected with this framework that then allowed you to have a relationship with an internal pattern of being that perhaps has been in your system for a while, that then led you to expanding your relational capacity, that led you into being able to put that into practice in real life and with other people. And that to me is how change happens. If we go back to Aquarius, I'm thinking about the connection between Aquarius and Leo, right? And there's something about Aquarius that I think is so deeply desiring of returning to the heart, right? Like Aquarius wants to come home to Leo just as Leo wants to come home to Aquarius, right? There's kind of this process of coming home or alchemy that the two signs are always kind of orienting towards with one another. And it's also making me think about the sun and Saturn, right? Um, the the center of the solar system and then the edges of what's available consistently through the naked eye. And where was I going with this? I think what I'm trying to, in my Mercury and Pisces way, communicate is that I think the sentiment has relaxed a little bit, but a few years ago, especially we're kind of in this last stretch of Uranus and Taurus, Sabrina, and I think one of the beautiful things that I've seen happening with Uranus and Taurus is people become much more aware of their body. But I want to caution the sentiment that almost separates the body on a very clinical level from the rest of the system, right? Because ultimately, what we want in doing embodiment work is to reconnect with the whole. And when somatic work is done almost as a punishment into like, no, just like feel into what's happening in your body and ignore all the other stimulus that's coming through or all these other impulses that maybe your mind wants to make sense of something. Maybe you, on an imaginative level, you clairvoyantly see or perceive things. I don't think that's really helpful because the point of having an awareness of the body is to reconnect with the entire system, right? And your story is such a beautiful example of that.
Yeah, I feel like something that was emphasized a lot in the training that I was in was like it's repairing a relationship to play. So there's Leo.
Beautiful.
It's a trauma
Yeah.
healing training. So you have Aquarius, Leo, and that there's a lot of benevolence and kindness in nature. There's a lot happening as well. That's not that, but there is just a natural mammalian nurturing field that we are
Mhm.
part of biologically, and that through trauma or indoctrination or whatnot, or getting separated from ourselves, we lose our mammalian instincts for care and love. And so to return to the body, there's a movement through all these layers of pain and all this stored information that's like not really about the present moment. And so, I know I've had the experience of ignoring content that was happening internally because it felt like too exaggerated, too out of proportion with what was
Mhm.
happening. And understanding that that's actually normal. Like when we have a
Mhm.
backlog of information, it's more than what the moment calls for. So as we clear that layer or become aware of it or gain the tools to digest it, which often actually comes not just through these techniques, but through a shared relational field where someone else helps us bear the burden of all the
Yeah.
pain and whatever that we've been holding on to, that as that material starts to melt and dissolve, there's this naturalness or like that riding the wave, that relaxed, alert, riding the wave frequency that you were speaking of. is happening all the time. It's just there, like in the world or like in community and whatnot. It's in the natural world. And it is sensational. It is stimulating. It's like a different web of life than maybe the things that we get entangled into.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so, do you have anything else that you want to impart on people about this transit or ways that you would invite people to work with you or connect?
Mm. I love that Venus in Aquarius comes after Venus in Capricorn because when I feel into Venus in Capricorn and my embodied experience with it, often what comes up is a desire to direct my energy towards something that can be durable. There's often during the season for me an awareness of this is what I want to work towards. Maybe it's a project, or maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's a particular goal. And Venus in Capricorn can help us connect with what truly matters. And also, Venus in Capricorn, I think, has an ability to attune to what lasts, right? For our personal or communal experience. And then Venus in Aquarius can be an invitation to taking a step back and really noticing whether the underlying energy or the underlying frequency with which we approach that creation of that project is in coherence with that goal, right? Let's say if I'm really interested in creating a music album and I want people to feel expanded and I want people to feel a sense that more is possible. What am I encoding into that project in terms of how I approach that project, right? Venus in Aquarius can be a great reminder of not just coming up with the best product possible, but attuning your day-to-day reality so that the frequency of how you work on the project gets encoded into the finished product, right? Whatever that finished product might be. And then the quality of what you're transmitting and what you are imparting on people is happening not just on a three-dimensional level, but
Yes,
also deeper. Yeah.
that goes for a lot of things. Like that goes for speaking to people and just being in space with people, like the energy that you're holding. I think of it with like things I've taught about glamour magic for like improving relationship to beauty and self-esteem of like when you're doing something, washing your face, whatever, that there's an intention. Because when we're struggling with body image or beauty stuff, we might be thinking something mean while we're
Mm.
doing something that has the intention to make us look good. And there's a
Yes.
deep incoherence there.
Yes.
So yeah, I think even with like physical touch and intimacy, like the kind of intention or the awareness inside of the touch, like all of these things, there's so many different ways to practice coherence. And it can be for people that maybe don't consider themselves energy workers or whatnot, because it's like you can take trainings or you can be particularly skilled at energy work. You can also start to practice noticing the quality of energy. And I think it's interesting actually how much that might weigh on someone, how much it might feel like a burden,
Mm.
right? To be aware of all of this. And
Yes.
yet it's happening anyway, whether or
Exactly.
not we're paying attention to it. It's the Saturnian
Exactly.
like inevitability about it.
Yes. That's such a great point, Sabrina. Yeah. Whenever I work with mentees who are in longer term container with me on energy work, the first thing I remind people or try to establish in the field is that part of stepping into being an energy worker or being living from a place of energetic sovereignty and awareness is recognizing how much we have been systematically trained out of our perception, right? There's so much happening all the time, and yet we were taught to compartmentalize and to not look at it. And the first step often for people is stepping back into looking at things and allowing yourself to perceive what you're perceiving and being with all the experiences that come with seeing, which I know in our work together, Sabrina, was also something that you've helped me do. This was maybe a mirror image of what you shared at the start of Diviner in 2025, right? That when people come to your space, they have an oracular nature within them that wants to be integrated. And the first step is to give yourself permission to look at that. Like you gave us this assignment of a morning and evening divination practice. And I've been on and off playing with that throughout the entire 2025, and that was really meaningful.
I'm so glad to hear.
Yeah. Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I love our exchanges so much. I know we both have calls at the hour, so I have to like end this kind of abruptly, even though we could keep talking about this.
Yes.
Um, yeah, just feeling a lot of gratitude for all the aliveness. Like this is
Mm.
something we don't really outline conversations. We haven't forever because there's just like an emergent field. And I feel like
Yes.
that's also another good example of what Venus in Aquarius and that Aquarian Pisces energy can play with this emergent field.
Yeah.
So thank you for everything. And um, for people watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what you're taking away from this. I forgot to say at the beginning to like and subscribe and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but it helps the algorithm. It helps this reach unknown people that may want to find this video. So there's some layers to that request
Yes.
or send the
Yes.
magic.
Yeah. And I think it works on a personal level too. Something that I have noticed for myself is when I take the time to, if I've been listening to something and I take the time to share some of my thoughts, it also helps me solidify and integrate what I've learned from this hour of listening to something. So do it for yourself too. I'll add to that.
Thank you. I'm excited to read what people say. And thank you so much, Jonathan. It was a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Sabrina. This is always such a joy to connect with you and speak with you. And I love you and I love everything that you do. So
I
this is
love
such an
you.
honor. Mhm.
Thank you, Jonathan.